current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Well, hello there. It's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewbs, and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll get into some of the things that have got you talking now. 100 days. That is a long time, isn't it? But it is a lifetime when it comes to politics. And today is Rishi Sunak's 100-day anniversary. How is he doing? You tell me. And bumper, and I mean bumper, profits for Shell announced today. It has got all the right people shouting that we need to tax them more. 75%, though, if you calculate it, is the rate that they should be paying on things that are profits that are applicable. How much more do you want them to pay? And this whole obsession when it comes to ticking boxes, quotas to make sure that we've got diverse workforces, is it going a little bit too far at the expense of, let's face it, quality? I would hate, I have to be honest, to be recruited just because I tick a box. Would you like it, though? Would it make you feel good that you've shoehorned yourself in? Perhaps, though, not on your merit. And homelessness, how on earth do we solve this? I'll have all of that and more, but first let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines.
Thank you, Michelle. Good evening to you. And our top story, Lancashire police say they've located a potential new witness in the search for Nicola Bulley. That's after they'd released an image of a woman who was seen in the area where the mother of two disappeared. She went missing last Friday in St Michael's-on-Wyre whilst out walking her dog. As part of the hunt, divers are still searching the nearby river. Well, also in the news today, the Bank of England has raised its base rate from 3.5% to 4%. That's the 10th consecutive increase in a row, adding that inflation has begun to fall. It also says the UK is set to enter recession this year, but stresses economic downturn could be shorter and less severe than previously expected. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, supports the Bank of England's decision.
But we recognise it is very difficult for families, businesses up and down the country when interest rates go up. But much harder for them would be if we didn't take decisive steps to bring down inflation. And that's why the Bank of England is absolutely right to do what they've done today. And we in the government must make sure we support them by what I do in the budget to make sure that we make it easier, not harder, for them to do what we all want to do, which is to halve inflation.
Well, the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, believes the central bank's decision was correct, even if it means more pressure on households.
I know that families are going to be very concerned about another increase in interest rates, which is going to put more pressure, particularly on people with mortgages. Already before this interest rate rise, we know that 4 million people coming off fixed rate deals or on tracker deals who on average are going to see mortgage payments go up by £2,500 a year. So a very difficult time for people.
The boss of British gas owner Centrica says he is horrified to hear about contractors for the company who've broken into customers' homes to fit energy meters. His comments came shortly after the energy regulator Ofgem announced it was launching an urgent investigation. It follows a Times sting in which an undercover journalist accompanied debt collectors who reportedly entered the homes of vulnerable people to force-fit prepayment meters. Energy and Climate Minister Graham Stewart says it's appalling and isn't good enough.
I brought in all the suppliers last week to talk about how we better look after vulnerable people, because there are clear rules and they have obviously not been followed, and therefore I need the regulator and I need the companies to do the right thing by people who are in the most difficult of circumstances and have been treated on this evidence appallingly.
Meanwhile, Shell says its profits have increased by more than 53%, with earnings of more than £68 billion last year. It's the company's highest profit in its 115-year history. The energy giant has benefited from soaring oil prices due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. A Downing Street spokesman has said the Prime Minister absolutely understands people's anger over Shell's record profits at a time of soaring household energy bills. But the Shadow Climate Change Secretary Ed Miliband says the government needs to step up.
When people look at the Shell profits, they are sick and tired of the way this country is being run. We don't have a proper windfall tax on companies like Shell. We have millions of people struggling to pay their energy bills, and we have the prospect of energy bills going up another 40% in April. That's why Labour would have a proper windfall tax on companies like Shell to stop bills rising again in April, and end the prepayment meter penalty that millions of people are paying.
Manchester United footballer Mason Greenwood has had all charges against him dropped. The 21-year-old forward faced allegations of attempted rape, controlling and coercive behaviour and assault. Greater Manchester Police said criminal proceedings have been discontinued by the Crown Prosecution Service. Greenwood has been suspended by United since news of his arrest in January last year. An independent inquiry into the 1998 Omagh bombing has been ordered by the Northern Ireland Secretary. The announcement follows long-running legal action brought by Michael Gallagher, whose son Aidan was killed in the real IRA bombing. 29 people died in the explosion in County Tyrone. Hundreds more were injured. And a former soldier has been given a 3-year suspended sentence for shooting a man in the back at an army checkpoint in Northern Ireland 35 years ago. In November, David Holden was convicted of the manslaughter of 23-year-old Aidan McAnespie in 1988. Holden was the first veteran to be found guilty of a historical offence in Northern Ireland since the Good Friday Agreement. That's your latest news. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. News throughout the evening, but first let's get back to Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that, Polly. I've just got a lovely email about you, Polly, from Judy. She says, can I just say how brilliant I think Polly is at reading the news? She goes on about your accent accent, your inflections, and she says, Polly, that she is very impressed with you. There you go. Nice email in from Judy. I am Michelle Dewbs, and of course I'm keeping you company until 7 o'clock this evening. Alongside me, I've got the political consultant Alex Dean and Aaron Bastani, the founder of Novara Media. Welcome, gents. Good evening to you guys. You never let me down, you guys at home, do you? Talking about my, well, I was just about to say my outfit, but people are talking about my accent as well tonight. Lee, you say that I look like a chevron tonight. Some people might think that I'd planned that because Chevron, of course, an oil and gas company, and I want to talk to you about oil and gas, whether or not we should have more windfall taxes. Alas, I really didn't plan it whatsoever. It's all accidental. Someone else says I look like a bar of soap. I don't know what you wash yourself with. I dread to think, and I'll leave it there. I want your thoughts on everything tonight. My topic's homelessness. How do we fix this issue? Some would say simple, just get on a dinghy in Calais and away you go. But beyond that, these rough sleepers that we have in our towns and cities across the land, what is the answer? Many of them, of course, don't want the help when they're offered it. So what do you do about it? I also want to talk to you about windfall taxes, Shell's bumper profits. Should we tax them more? And if so, how much more? 75% is one of the tax rates that's been applied to relevant profits with them. How far do we go? 90, 95%? I want your thoughts on that. But first up, 100 days. That is how long Rishi Sunak has been in charge of this country. And what do you make of that 100 days? Has it been positive in your eyes? I mean, we've had it all going on, haven't we? We've had scandals around Nadeem Zahawi's tax. We've had U-turns. We've had bullying allegations against people in his office. You name it. Do you think it's been a positive 100 days, Alex?
Oh, I do. Let's start with a positive for the Conservative Party, admittedly off a low base. I think he's doing rather better than his predecessor, right? He smashed her record for a start. Yeah, he'd been in more than twice as long. So that's my starting point. Secondly, and more seriously, there's no doubt that he has brought a sense of seriousness and stability to the great office that he holds. The number one thing, if he hadn't got this done, nothing else would have mattered. He needed to reassure financial markets and reassure the world of finance that the UK was a serious place and was a place that they could trust. And broadly speaking, he's done that. You know, the pound is basically back to where, in fact, a bit better than it would have been before. Trusts, gilts are back to where they ought to be, and he's got a serious economic plan. So that's my second thing. But the third thing by which anyone in politics will always judge a leader is, do you think they're going to win the next election or not? And I think that the Conservative Party is far more, not a bit, far more likely to do well at the next election than current opinion polls would suggest. And for at least one of these reasons, I think Aaron will agree with me. My first point is that Keir Starmer is not a transformative, inspirational
he's not
leader.
Blair.
Right? He's certainly not a Blair, or indeed, on the other hand, he's not a man of the traditional left that can rally people around the kinds of issues that have got people out on strike at the moment. He's neither betwixt nor between. He's really neither one thing nor the other. And in an election, in the end, you come down to it and you say, am I for this side or for that side? Mm-hmm. And faced with the alternative, I think Sunak does well. Second point, in opinion polls, we are basically discounting in a lot of the studies don't knows. So the Conservative Party's got a huge number of people to try to reach out to. Boundary changes yet to come, which will favour the Conservative Party. Seats lost in the ignominious series of by-elections to which you were referring in your introduction will, generally speaking, not take anyone's vote for granted, come back. So I think the image for the Conservative Party going into the next election, and polls always narrow anyway as you get closer in towards it, is far better. So for those reasons, I think it's been a good 100 days.
How many marks out of 10 would you give him so far in his first 100 days?
I mean, to recover from where he arrived, a 10 out of 10. I mean, it's
10 out of 10?
What he had to overcome and the challenges he's had to deal with that you've been talking about. I can't think of another person in the party right now who would have ridden those bumps as well.
Cool, blimey, 10 out of 10, that is a very high
By the way,
mark.
I didn't vote for him either time, right? So that's my position.
He gives him a 10 out of 10. Do you think that's reasonable?
Alex is very persuasive. You know, I heard all that. I thought these aren't arguments you often hear, that Sunak's doing well, that Tories are doing well. I buy the stability argument. I mean, that's incontrovertible. But we're talking about politics. We have to look at polling. We have to talk about the next general election. The Tories aren't just 5, 10, even 15 points behind. Some polls have them 20, 25 points behind. My view on Sunak was his job really in 2023 was just to get the Tories hovering around the low 30s. And like you say, in an election year, you can close that. That hasn't happened. So that sense of stability, which he clearly has brought to the role, hasn't fed through to polls. Now, the general election is a long way off, and I agree with Alex. I think the Tories will overachieve compared to where polls are presently. But I think that still gives Labour a decent majority. And I think the fact that you've got 100 days of him in office, and after that 100 days, normally people say, I'll be in for 100 days and judge me after those 100 days. He's coming in after 100 days saying, I'm making some promises. Now, to conclude, Alex would say, well, he had to do the stability thing first. I buy that, but there are no real accomplishments there. And I think people will probably think intuitively, look, this chap's been there for 3 months and he's still talking.
Yeah, but he had his 5 pledges, didn't he? And one of them was he wanted to halve inflation. So people would look at that and say, I'm not saying it's his work, but inflation is coming down. It's going in the right direction. He was out and about today, wasn't he, talking about his small Berts plan? I mean, I don't believe that he'll actually achieve anything on that, but that's by the by. So some people would say that he is making progress. He is achieving positive things. Would you give him how many out of 10? He says 10 out of 10, which I think is a little bit extreme.
Quickly, I'd say 4 out of 10, but I would add, look, what's the news been in the last week, 2 weeks? We're going to have lower economic growth than Russia this year. We've got an interest rate rise.
He's projecting.
According to the IMF, of course, it could be wrong. Of course, it could be wrong. But we're talking about projections right now. And you had, I think, the highest rate of business insolvencies in 13 years was recently announced. So those are the realities. Those are the realities right now of a Conservative government. And he's saying, I would also cut NHS waiting times, et cetera, et cetera. We've got paramedics on strike. So the actual accomplishments are few and far between.
On the insolvency thing, by the way, obviously there was protections put in place throughout the pandemic that made it harder for creditors to go after things. So once those lifted, you was always going to see...
I'm not blaming Sunak for that, but that's the reality of the British economy right now.
That's true. Your point is very well made. We basically put our economy in stasis for a couple of years over coronavirus. But the unspoken truth, in which all of the major parties in politics have been complicit, is that debt has been extremely cheap. And lots of businesses, which are effectively unproductive, zombie companies staggering without any real growth or productivity, were able to keep going because they could borrow almost for free. And the thing that has killed them off isn't just the removal of government protections over coronavirus, it's the increase in interest rates, back to what any economist would regard as normality. The period in which we've become used to almost stagnation, with companies not going out of business, is economically unusual. It's the hiatus. It's not the norm. The norm isn't to have ultra-low interest rates. The norm is basically where we are, or even higher interest rates. So it's just a natural... The fact that we've got the highest business insolvencies for 13 years is completely predictable.
And you mentioned people going out on strike. Ambulance crews, I think, were the ones that you picked up on. Do you think there is an element of political... game playing now when it comes to these strikes? Lots of them joined up, coordinated. Mick Lynch was saying yesterday, irrespective of who we work for, we are united. Do you think it's a concerted play to try and bring the government down?
Well, they're trying to maximise their leverage. I think fundamentally they're all trying to get higher wages. I don't think if these industries had a choice between meeting our demands, having our wage rises sort of tied with inflation for 2022, 2023, or 2023, 2024, I think they would take that. I don't think the idea is, we'll install a Labour government. And let's be real, many people within the trade union movement, particularly on the left, aren't very fond of Keir Starmer. And they're under no illusions about what a Labour government will do. So I think really, no, the primary objective here is those wage increases.
Well, of course, the union masters aren't that fond of Starmer, who prefers the ersatz to the real, but they certainly prefer him over Rishi Sunak and the Conservative Party. My fear isn't the question that Aaron fairly asks, which is, would they prefer to bring down the government or get their demands? My thinking is, on the union side, they think they can do both. They think they're going to get their demands met, broadly speaking, and also do enough harm to the Tory Party and Sunak to ensure a change of government when they can get their way even more. I mean, it's plain when unions are coordinating like this that it is political. This effort against the Prime Minister and against the government is not simple. There are, of course, grievances that people are entitled to air and indeed entitled to withdraw the Labour. But what is obvious to an external observer is that this coordination is driven by political ambition.
Can I ask a quick question? Is that okay? Because you're the boss here. Do you honestly think the Royal College of Nurses is a political union when, under their own rules, they wouldn't go on strike or undertake industrial action until the 1990s? Would you say it's a political left-wing union, the Royal College of Nurses?
You don't cherry-pick. I was saying, look at the broad picture of union activity, including the kind of rhetoric that Michelle rightly points to from some of its most prominent leaders, saying it doesn't even matter what job you're in, we're all united in this effort, basically, against the government. And that, I think, is political. But given that you ask a question about the nursing union, I wonder about the extent to which they genuinely represent the best interests of their nurses when they start, and their members, when they start an argument saying they wanted negotiated 19% pay rises, 19, and then saying, well, don't worry, we're willing to negotiate and compromise. Well, of course you are, because if you start at 19% in a single financial year, even if the government meets you halfway, you're still being completely unreasonable.
I mean, well, this is a separate topic, but I mean, they've seen their real pay fall by the end of this year, their real pay would have fallen compared to 2010 by 20%. So a 19% pay rise is merely saying we want the same living standards as we had in 2010 when the Tories came to government. That doesn't seem outrageous to most people, I think.
But it's undeliverable to demand it in such a short period of time with a workforce that is the largest in the entire country. More people work for the NHS now than ever have been done before, and more people are working in the NHS than for anyone else. You just can't deliver the size and scale of increase that they are talking about in any normal financial circumstances, especially given it's a double-edged sword, right? But if the IMF forecast, which I agree with you is very often corrected and wrong, if the IMF forecast anything like correct, then the contraction that is going to happen in our economy is going to have ramifications for government spending.
But also, though, I mean, my mum and sister are NHS nurses, as I reference frequently, so I want them to get the best pay deal possible. But if you give the nurses 19%, what then do you do? Because then you've given the RCN their 19% demand, and then what? The other unions are going to say, right, well, they've got theirs, we want ours. So then what you're going to do is you're going to have above inflation rises for what? The whole of the public sector? Then what is the private sector going to do? They're going to go, hang on a second, everyone over there is getting wages. We want high rises. How do you afford all that?
So firstly, at present, wages in the private sector are wage increases in the private sector are about double what they are in the public sector. That's the reality.
So about what, 7% or something in the private sector?
It's about 7%, and in public is about 3 to 4%. So significantly above. So if we're talking about wages, which, by the way, no wage increases are impacting inflation in this country. They're not pushing up, whether it's private or public.
They're not what? Did you say wage?
They're not meeting it.
Sorry, Edgar.
Yeah, so, and if you look at, for instance, I think it was the Institute for Fiscal Studies, the IFS, and again, we can say, well, that's just their sums. They said that if you gave every public sector worker in this country a pay rise in line with inflation, so not 19%, OK, they said it would cost about £18 billion. Now, the government says it would cost £25 billion. The IFS is saying £18 billion. Billionaires in this country alone increased their net worth by more than £100 billion during the pandemic. So this is a very bad situation for the country. It's a horrific thing to go through, 10, 11% inflation, and so we have to make a choice as a society. Do we want the burden of that crisis to fall on those particular sectors of the labour market who we really depend on? Teachers, nurses, firefighters. And I think given the background of austerity preceding all of this, I think the argument is very, very compelling to say, no, actually their wage rises should be in line with inflation.
So you would tax the billionaires to fund it?
More or less, yeah.
Well, even though the top 1% pays 28% of the tax base already, and you'd rather they stayed than left. But all right, let's accept your premise on what you would want to do. Let's take the comparison you're making between private and public, and indeed an example that you chose to volunteer about teachers. Both my parents are teachers. I admire the profession greatly. I want good people to go into the teaching profession. It's not just about salary. But if you do look at salary, we pay around the top end of every country in Europe, and they work around the lowest number of hours of teachers in Europe. And our spend on education is one of the highest in the whole of the OECD. Right? Even beyond Europe, our spend on education sector in this country is incredibly high. Then you consider the fact that teachers have a circa 13-week holiday and a defined benefit pension contribution from their employer of 23%. Anyone in the private sector looks at that and thinks to themselves, hang on a second. Do you really think you should be mentioned in the same breath as hospital cleaners who haven't had a rise? Especially after children, I'm disabusing a whole number of people on air who I've grown up with and have gone into teaching, but for heaven's sake, we've had 2 years of education stymied effectively during coronavirus. And just when children need their teachers the most, what do you want to do? Strike. Now, most teachers want to work, right? This is another reason why I say it's political. They're being led by their unions into doing something that is profoundly against the interests of their customer, the children, and isn't warranted by their pay situation.
Can I respond quickly?
Yeah, last word to you on it.
Lucky me.
Yeah.
I think we have to take each sector on its own merit. So, for instance, nursing, we have a shortage of 47,000 nurses in the NHS right now. It's the primary reason why so much is going wrong, whether it's ambulance waiting times or A&E waiting times. It is the primary reason, that lack of nurses, 47,000 of them. Clearly, we're going to struggle with recruitment if we're not paying them more. So I think that's the first point. Secondly, on teachers, they do get very generous pensions, it's true. And I'd want to disaggregate the fact that, yes, they get the generous pensions, but at the same time, their pay shouldn't fall by 8-9% in a single year. you've got rising mortgage costs, you've got rising energy costs, and I think that they should be punished for
continue
that.
negotiating. It doesn't mean you should strike.
Well, there you go. You've had different views. What's yours? I'll have a look at what you're saying at this. Let's have a look. Michael, give you your moment of fame. Get you on the screen, Michael. You're saying you give Sunak an 8 out of 10 when compared with the utter shambles that was Johnson. Richard says Sunak's doing all right and I believe he will deliver, but he must cut loose the toxic force of Jeremy Hunt in order to prosper in the polls. How important do you think it is, by the way, to so-called prosper in the polls? Your words, not mine. I don't really pay that much attention to polls. Half the time I think that they're wrong, but maybe you place more importance on them than me. Sandy says, I cannot accept Sunak for what he did to Boris and the way he became PM. Bring back Boris. He's our real democratically elected PM. I'll tell you what he is, probably a pain in the bottom to Rishi Sunak. He's popping up everywhere, isn't he? You can't seem to get him off the stage when it comes to Ukraine, for example. Anne says, I remember Sunak saying that he would sort migration out in the first 100 days if he was Prime Minister. Then that was when he was up against Liz Truss. Is that what he said, that he would sort it out in the first 100 days, or was that one of his priority areas for the 100 days? I can't remember that. Did he say that he'd fix it?
Well, I do distinctly remember pledges when he went into Downing Street. I could be wrong. I don't want to mischaracterise what he said.
There was a pledge, but I don't think it was the first 100 days. Look, I'm not making excuses, though. It's the hardest of the 5 pledges he's made, and it's very difficult to see how the government's going to make headway with the rules as they currently are.
Yeah, I've got to say, I don't hold out much hope, actually. I'm not sure we will see any changes. I think we'll see things getting a lot worse in that situation crossing the Channel before we see it getting better, if at all. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, Shell, the energy company, they have boasted record profits, bumper profits, their highest, in fact, in their 115-year history. So many people now are shouting, tax them more, yes! How much more, though? They already pay 75% on eligible profits. What do you want them to pay? 90, 95? Sod it, let's go 100. Where are you on that? I'll see you in 2 minutes.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewbs and I'm keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock this evening. Alongside me, the political consultant Alex Dean and Aaron Bastani, the founder of Novara Media. Welcome back, everybody. You guys have been getting in touch. I'm trying to find somebody who is on the same par as Alex. I've got to say, I will admit it's proving difficult. I want someone else that agrees that Sunak's 100 days have been a 10 out of 10. I can't find you at the moment. David says that Sunak is corrupt as the rest of them. John says, while this country is run by bankers and lawyers, it will never thrive. Ordinary people will never, ever benefit. Kevin, no matter what Sunak does in the future, I will never vote Tory whilst he is the leader. He was prepared to destroy Truss and the Tories for his personal ambition. Lots of people are getting in touch with that sentiment as well, perhaps suggesting that many politicians are prioritising their personal ambitions ahead of the what's best for the country or indeed their party. Keep your thoughts coming in. gbviews@gbnews.uk is my email address. Right, let's talk Shell, shall we? The oil company. Get this, everyone. Are you sitting comfortably? 32 billion, with a B, billion pounds last year. That was their profit, I've got to say. I think it's their highest in their 115-year history. Needless to say, it's brought up the whole conversation about windfall tax, because we all know that so many of us are struggling with our bills. You've had stories today, I think it was British Gas. It's come out in the press now that they've been getting warrants for, or one of their agencies has been getting warrants to go into people's houses when they've not paid their bills, and then you hear profits like £32 billion. Aaron, where do you stand on this?
I think it should be obviously taxed to a significantly higher extent. I think when you've got a business which is making huge profits because of innovation and they're providing a new service to customers which they didn't have before, they're creating real value in the market, good luck to them. But what we have here is a business which is benefiting, and I'm not attacking Shell for that, that's just what's happened in the last 12 months. They're benefiting from a geopolitical cataclysm, which is the war in Ukraine, and which is having a really negative impact for the UK energy consumer. And I think it's a perfectly sensible thing to say, well, while this is happening, let's increase the tax on these unprecedented profits you've got. I mean, these are really high profits. I believe they are the third highest profits that are set to be posted by a UK business, so after British American Tobacco and Vodafone. So
yeah, and just to be clear, everyone, of course, these are global profits. These are not profits that are made just in the UK. Let me ask you one quick point there, because you say when the profits are going up because of a geopolitical catastrophe that's outside of their control, we should increase the tax on them. Do you support the reverse argument then? So when their profits are in free fall, perhaps even in losses in some cases, because of geopolitical catastrophes outside of their control, would you agree then to give them more money as a bolster to them?
I don't think we need to have a general rule. I think it's quite a sensible thing to say, this is an energy company, people are paying more for their energy, they're making significant profits.
Yeah.
I think they should be able to help out the energy consumer in this country, because it's driving millions of people into penury. So I don't think we need to have a general rule. Like I say, if, for instance, you have a business making tens of billions of pounds of profit because of a new product which is adding value to people's lives, good for them. I think this is very different.
Last question before I bring in Alex in. 75% is the tax rate currently. What would you want it to go up to then?
Just push it up.
To what?
Well, no, push it up. I'm not. I don't know what. I'm not the tax and spend person at Whitehall or doing the shadow cabinet sums. But I think, as a principle of fairness, I think if they have higher profits than were being anticipated, say, 6 months ago, and these policies were being sort of percolated through into Downing Street, it should clearly be higher. I think it seems like a sensible thing to do.
Higher than 75%,
So
Alex?
My fear would be that once you start going north of 75, businesses start thinking about re-domiciling. And Conservatives aren't opposed necessarily to windfall taxes, and we've had them in the past under
Margaret Thatcher.
Tory government. So, and I accept that I bet they wish they hadn't handed down the results today, just as the bank puts up interest rates and so forth. Pragmatically, you can't help but think they're going to contribute more than they did before. And I just think, if they were smart, they'd have started making, 9-figure voluntary payments in to try and help the country. But if you start making rules that say you've got to pay north of 75% of your profit, businesses like this will start making decisions. Not least, bear in mind, until recently, this was a company that was dual listed between the Netherlands and the UK. And when forced to choose, which is not an outcome that the EU was ever expecting or wanted to encourage, they chose to single list in the UK because it was seen by them as a more favourable business environment. If we start being a less favourable business environment, you'll find out that, for argument's sake, your 80% that you push it up to, 80% of nothing isn't very much, whereas 75% of a great deal is worth having. So that's the concern that I have. And I just want to make one more point about this industry. They really do innovate. You may not like the things they innovate in. Fracking was an innovation. People spent a lot of money on the fracking technique before they were able to deliver it. some of the fields in the North Sea were declared basically dead. They were economically inactive, and businesses spent hundreds of millions of pounds exploring them and going deeper and finding out what you could extract there before they became economically viable again. Many environmentalists hate all this, but the idea that those companies don't innovate is completely...
I didn't say that. I said the base of this profitability is geopolitics. It's not because they've created some new innovation.
I accept that premise, yeah.
But we still haven't got to nuts and bolts of it, because we're saying 75%. So just to be clear, in this country, normal corporation tax is about the 19% mark as it stands at the moment. So the oil companies, they get a 30% corp tax plus a 10% supplementary charge, plus this 35% so-called wind tax, as we're referring to it. So 75% they're paying versus there or thereabouts 20% for other businesses. And I just want to push you on this whole concept, Aaron, because there's so many pension funds that are invested in these energy companies. I think in 2021, there was a calculation done that showed that it was about £2,000 for every person in the UK was invested in these energy companies. And when you put your pensions into these organisations, it's in the interest of the growth of those funds, all of our pensions, that these companies are making as much profit, are paying as many dividends as possible. So wouldn't you be worried if you're damaging their profitability that you're effectively damaging the pension funds of everyone?
So I think the pensions argument, I think, is overstated. So I think the relationship between pensions and UK-based pensions and the FTSE, I think, is often overstated, but it exists, I'll admit that.
Well, 2021, I grant you that's not, it's not yesterday, but 2021's not that long ago, and it was averaged £2,000 per person.
But in terms of the people who are exposed to what goes up and down in the FTSE, pension funds are actually a much smaller slither than we often believe. In terms of the what I would do with that, actually, going back to that, you walk down the high street, wherever your viewers are, I don't know, they might be in Carlisle or Bournemouth or Aberystwyth, walk down the high street, go into a business, say, what can the government do to help you? I think most of them would say, you know what, people just haven't got enough money to spend right now. Cut to VAT. A bit like we have in 2008-9 with the Gordon Brown government. Cut it by 5%, just for 6 months a year. I think increasing a windfall tax to pay for something like that would be fantastic for the UK economy, fantastic for blue-collar Brits who watch this show. It would really help them. And I think we go off into abstraction about, well, should profits be taxed this much and so on. Shell are printing money right now. Lots of people are struggling, and the cause for both is the same, the war in Ukraine. So I think it's a sensible policy. I'm not saying as a general rule we should, tax them till the pips squeak. I'm not saying that. I could say that because I'm a socialist. I'm not saying that. I'm saying in this particular incident, with regards to energy, with the war in Ukraine, I think it's sensible to be able to pay for tax cuts elsewhere to help stimulate the economy at the expense of Shell.
The reason that people on the left won't put a number on it, certainly I watched your package with interest, and Ed Miliband, who's proposing the policy, didn't put a number on it. There's much more responsibility on him than put on Aaron on the panel today to actually say how much it would be, right? And Ed Miliband wouldn't say how much it was going to be. The reason they don't is that once they start saying that, you then work out the delta that between what they currently pay and what Labour says they're going to gain, as opposed to the risk of these companies saying, right, actually, a Labour government would be terrible for business, and we've got to get off this. These companies are actually always politically risk-averse, and they don't like getting involved in scraps with parties. But if they think to themselves, if this carries on and the Labour Party gets in, we can't be listed in the UK anymore, that's the kind of oppositional conversation Miliband would trigger if he starts putting a number on it. If you think about it, you're trying to have your cake and eat it. If you say, I want this policy, but I won't tell you how much it is, it's quite cowardly by the Labour Party to say, we will put it up. It's going to be a proper tax. Won't tell you how much, just in case it riles them and they start doing some economics on it, but I'd put it up.
Yeah, I just think once you start getting over, I mean, if you think about yourself, once you start, you're paying 75% of your earnings, you think, where is the incentive? And I know I'm breaking it down to an individual level.
Printing money, 40 billion.
Yeah, but then, yeah, I know,
a lot
but then
of it's
also...
going to go in tax, right?
Yeah, and also, by the way, Shell wasn't losing money, but it was certainly, during the pandemic, if you actually look at what they were declaring as profits, it was minuscule compared to where they currently are. And if you was a shareholder in Shell as well, I think for the first time in a very long time, you had your dividends cut as well. And I can hear the tiny little violins bleeding and playing as I speak. Richard says there's nothing wrong with Shell making massive profits in good times. because they make huge losses in lean times that nobody cries about. I think it is worth saying, by the way, for many years, many of these energy companies haven't paid tax in the UK because obviously you can offset things like when you decommission platforms and you make investments and all the rest of it. Dale says anyone can buy shares in Shell, so anyone can share in their dividends. Shell just have to be fortunate by circumstances, and what if circumstances go the other way? Theo says, if you're going to impose further windfall taxes, then you might as well nationalise it. I bet you'd be in favour of that, wouldn't you?
Well, BP used to be Anglo-Iranian oil, or Anglo-Persian oil. At one point, it was nationally owned.
But you wouldn't be in favour now of, like, renationalising these energy producers, would you?
No, I think I think the government's got far more important things it needs to be focusing its attention on.
Good. Like homelessness, which is what I'll be talking about in just a couple of minutes. How do we fix this problem? And don't give me the obvious answer of just getting in a boat at Calais and coming over and getting into a hotel. I'm talking a bit broader than that. What do we do? There's so many people, thousands of people, still sleeping on the streets in Britain. What on earth do we do about it? Give me your thoughts and I'll see you in 2.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV
Surprised
with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh, good.
Already to bless.
Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous. Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dewbs and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Coming up on Dan Watson Tonight, as a bombshell poll reveals a majority of Brits have lost faith in Rishi Sunak, is there a path to Tory victory in 2024? Former Brexit Secretary David Davis weighs in. Plus, there'll be unfiltered opinion from our man of the people, Charlie Lawson, and political firebrand Anne Widdecombe. And is Prince Andrew right to fight for a comeback? Our royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, give their no-holds-barred take. Don't miss Dan Watson Tonight, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m, only on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry. This is Dewbs & Co, and I'm keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, the political consultant Alex Dean and Aaron Bastani, the founder of Novara Media. That's going to trouble me all night long. If you were watching the telly then, you just saw that promo, didn't you, for Dan's show with Charlie Lawson. I'm sure he used to be on Coronation Street.
I'm sorry, I'm not a viewer.
And I was asking these two.
I've let you down.
I know, since these two, is that the guy off Coronation Street? And they all looked at me blankly. I'm sure it is there. Anyway, I will move on. I'll wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and it'll ping into my head. I'll wake up thinking about him with the answer, I'm sure. Let's talk homelessness, shall we? Gloucester Council have been basically talking about whether or not they should put signs up to direct people to homeless shelters and things like that. They've basically clearly worried about it because they don't want to become a beacon to homelessness, encouraging people to go over to their place and set up camp, I suspect, on the streets for the night. It got me pondering then, Alex, about the whole situation about rough sleeping. Thousands of people are sleeping rough on the streets, particularly in London. You see it a lot when you're driving from A to B. How do you get around this? What do you do? How do you fix it?
So the most important thing isn't whether there's a sign up. The most important thing is that somebody goes and physically talks to somebody. Right? That's the way that breakthroughs in this environment are achieved. And sometimes, as you know, sometimes people don't want help. I've volunteered at my local shelter, and sometimes people are just perfectly happy not to. But quite often it's because they don't realise what assistance is available to them. So it's very easy to criticise this council for doing what they've done, but I actually don't think it's the most important thing. I wanted just to restrict my thoughts on this to one area, because the number of the percentage of people who are homeless in this country who come from our ex-armed forces, it would make your head spin. It's a national scandal, and in my view, I think one thing we could, because you asking what can we do to fix it. One thing we should do to fix it is that anyone who's served in combat for this country should be able to walk into a recruiting centre for the rest of their lives and say, I need help. And if assessed that they do, get it.
But what is that, and I must say, I'm firing off the top of my head now, what is that military, I thought it was like a military covenant thing.
Yeah, military covenant.
That said, actually, that you do get more support than your average Joe.
That is true, and Johnny Mercer has, it's basically made it his mission in life to promote that, and I really admire what he's done to do it. But to take advantage of it, you have to know that it's there. And my point would be that with people who are living homelessly, and as the word goes around about what you can do, and if someone comes up and tells you there's something you can do, you've already got in the spine of this country a system-made set of facilities. And there may not be as many as there once were, but we still have recruiting offices in this country, including here in London and in central London, which are, literally an open door shop window to say, this is the military, here we are. And it seems to me we could be, in the same way we've been imaginative about making churches the centres of communities and taking on things like post office facilities as the post office is closed, we could be quite imaginative about the estate that we have in the military with those recruiting offices. So that's my one suggestion.
Yeah, and I have to say, I do agree with you. I think it is a national shame that any veteran sleeping on the streets who doesn't want to be there, because I do, some, for whatever reason, they want to live independently there. But, it's shameful anyway that is a situation if they don't want to be out there. Aaron, your thoughts on it all?
No, it's a really great point, Alex. I mean, we're talking about thousands of people, veterans who are rough sleeping in often, appalling conditions. I mean, of course it's appalling, but you think these people have served their country. They're in sub-zero temperatures in very inhospitable places. It's a disgrace, frankly. In addition to that, I would say that as far as I understand it, the sort of wraparound social care services you get in this country generally dissolve at 16. And so if somebody's younger than 16, they get a hell of a lot more help than they would at 17, 18, 19. And so what you do see a lot is people basically falling through the net the minute they're no longer 16. You're out on your own. Now, some people might think, well, that's fine, they're adults. But that has huge costs to society over time because, of course, they can't contribute through taxes, they can't find work. They're obviously going to have to be paid for with other services later on down the line. They might go to prison or mental health services or whatever, whereas actually they could be, really productive members of society. So that would be my addition, I think. We need wraparound services for people after 16.
Yeah, let's have a look what you guys have got to say, shall we? Max says, this all stems down for the downturn in society, morality of the last 40 years. This is part of Britain becoming more multicultural, a liberal society where single-parent families are the norm. Michael says, homeless people in our home city of Hull said that they preferred to remain living on the street as they felt part of something. I'm sorry, he says, but they don't want a normal existence like the rest of us. I think what you're referring to, Michael, is in Hull that there was, and I think there probably are, lots of people sleeping homeless, but the council is adamant that there's no reason for that, that in the hostels or whatever there are enough spaces so that nobody in that city should be on the streets. Laurie says there is an epidemic, Michelle, of over 60s who have been priced out of the rental market and are now staying in homeless hostels because local authorities cannot house them above the housing migrants. Is that true? Are you an over 60s? that was once living in private rented accommodation and can no longer? Give me your thoughts on that. And thank you, by the way. You people do not let me down. I do not need to wake up at 3 in the morning pondering who that fella was, because you've all just told me Jim MacDonald. Yes, that is exactly who I meant from Coronation Street. Thank you for that public service telling me who he was. I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, I want to talk to you about discrimination, basically, and about this whole kind of diversity stuff. How should it be? You know, we all want diversity, but at what cost? At the cost of standards? Do we forget merit and just tick boxes? Give me your thoughts. I'll see you in 2.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway...
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewbs and I'm keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, I've got the political consultant Alex Dean and Aaron Bastani, the founder of Novara Media. We were just talking about homelessness there, and one of my viewers got in touch and said there's an epidemic of over 60s homeless that can't afford to rent. I was asking, are you one of them? Hannah said, Michelle, do you seriously think if someone is over 60 and homeless, sleeping rough, they are sitting there watching your show and will reply to you, sorry, but can you get real? Hannah, you make a good point. Although people do have smartphones, you know. I don't know, you might surprise me. And homelessness, by the way, it doesn't necessarily just mean sleeping rough on the streets. Homelessness in this country can mean that you're in temporary accommodation. You might be in a B&B or sleeping on someone's sofa or something, I don't know. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, does the word homelessness. Anyway, let's talk about diversity and, by definition, in some cases, discrimination, because the RAF has been accused of discriminating against 160 white men in its effort to tick diversity boxes, basically. This comes as well off the back of Met Police. You've seen those guys who've been accepting applicants that can't really speak or write English. Why? Well, of course, in an effort to tick diversity boxes. Aaron, do you think we are in danger of basically giving up standards in order to tick diversity boxes?
Well, I need to be perhaps corrected on this, but as I understand it, this is illegal. You can't discriminate against somebody on the basis of their gender or race or age because of the Equality Act. I mean, you can take what's called positive action. So if you have 2 broadly similar candidates, you can use one of those categories as the basis for your choice. But you can't say, I'm hiring this person because of their skin colour. You can't do that. That's illegal. So I'm sort of surprised at this whole story.
The RAF has been accused of this as it stands at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, if that was the case, they'd be breaking the law. Well, of course, but you've got a Conservative, MP, Tobias Ellwood, talking about him. It's a very, very serious assertion to be making. Clearly, people shouldn't be discriminated against because of their skin colour or their gender or their age. This is ridiculous.
But you know it happens, right? Surely you must see. I mean, there's lots of different examples where you'll see, I don't know, some old white guy getting fired or getting let go or not getting his contract renewed, and then in his place comes a young black female or something like that, and you look at that and you think, has that appointment been made purely on benefit and merit, or is
But
this
you're
the
asking a
board of
question. We don't know what... I mean, like I said, it's a criminal offence.
Well, I'd actually make a massive assumption and say, yes, it was.
If you have a hiring decision between the two, it's illegal. So I find this whole sort of speculative, is it this, is it that, it's illegal. So it shouldn't be happening. So if somebody's saying to me, do you think it's right? No, I think it's wrong. It's also illegal.
But do you think it does happen? Because
I'm sure it happens.
I do. I really
I'm sure it happens. But
what do you think then about quotas? So do you think, for example, a company should be able to have a quota, whether it's I want 20% female or whatever? Yeah. Do you support those kind of things?
Well, I saw the London Metropolitan Police Service saying we want 40% of new hires, I think, next year or this year, or 40% being BAME. I think it's ridiculous. I think you can't hire people like that. You need to hire on the basis of aptitude. I mean, you can say we have a commitment to hire more people that, from these communities. That's great. But a quota, I think, is ill-judged.
Alex?
Well, of course, the Metropolitan Police target is by this year, and they are at half of their stated target. So to achieve it, they would have to fire hundreds and hundreds of white officers and hire hundreds and hundreds of black officers, which would be the most obvious example of discrimination possible. So when you face that kind of thing, you can do what I'm sure they will do and say, oh, it's terrible we failed to meet our target, woe is us, let's try again. Or you might sensibly say, this target was ridiculous to begin with. After all, the most important thing isn't the colour of the skin of the person policing you. It is the content of their character and their ability to uphold the law and its values. And it seems to me it's just the same with the RAF. Part of the conversation with the RAF that Tobias Ellwood was talking about is the suggestion that they have lowered standards on testing in order to get people in, but maintain, this is a great example of doublethink, that it won't affect standards once they're hired. I mean, it's tautological. Of course it will affect standards if you've lowered the standards by which you hire people. My view is that we should hire on merit. And I, of course, as a Conservative, think about the fact we now have the most diverse cabinet in history, brought to you by a party that has produced 3 female prime ministers, hiring and appointing on merit.
But if it's exclusively on merit, how do you get, how do you achieve things like social mobility? Because let's just say, I want it on merit, everyone's got to have a degree, everyone's got to do this, that. If you're from, like, some, bad city in some city, bad school in some city somewhere, you're not ever going to get those...
Which one do you want to ask? James Cleverly, family comes over from Sierra Leone, mum cleaner. Kemi Badenoch, you want to go and talk to... No, it hasn't... not in favour right now, but Kwasi Kwarteng, of course, briefly, our Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister of this country. Of course, many on the left will say it's the wrong kind of diversity. They don't like that. These examples, please choose another one. I would say this is diversity in action, and the Conservative Party's achieved it whilst selecting people. You may not like them, but they've selected them on merit.
It makes a good point, doesn't it? The Tories are very more diverse than the Labour Party.
Absolutely, no, it's an absolute scandal that Labour is the way it is on this.
Why do you think it is?
I think Labour, because the presumption is that the British electorate doesn't want a woman Prime Minister or doesn't want a person of colour, that, they need to take the safe pick. And actually, counterintuitively, they're wrong, because we've had 3 female Prime Ministers and now we've got a Prime Minister who's of Asian heritage.
But a lot of people in the Labour Party can't even say what a woman is. Never mind,
this is a separate issue.
Well, kind of separate but linked. Do you not think?
I think so. No, that's without getting into philosophical questions, that's a ontological issue. This is a question about representation.
Well, do you know what I'll do? I'll save that philosophical question then for another time. In the meantime, I'll share some thoughts that people are saying about you guys. Mark is saying, what a pleasure to listen to your 2 guests today. They disagree on certain things, but they talk instead of shouting and interrupting. Thank you to you both. Brian says, what an excellent debate between these two gentlemen. It's like a tennis match. Score at present, 40-15 to Alex. But this was a little while ago. It was tending to go for the winner. But yeah, I think it's updated since then. Ed said, so refreshing to watch two people with completely opposing political views debating sensibly. Well done, all. That's what we like. Respectful debate. That's all I've got time for. Thank you. I'll see you tomorrow.
Hello, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Another dry day for the vast majority tomorrow. A bit brighter, perhaps a bit more in the way of sunshine here and there, and it will be a mild day as well. Dry because high pressure remains in control, but it's not dry everywhere at the moment, and it won't be overnight tonight. These weather fronts are slowly pushing southwards, and notice how close the isobars are. It's turning very windy once more over northeast England and eastern Scotland especially. Rain across northwest Scotland, that will edge south through the night. As I say, very blustery in the northeast at times. The rain creeping into Northern Ireland, southern Scotland. But as it does so, it's kind of fizzling out, so won't amount to much. Certainly further south, most dry, very mild here, 7, 8, 9 degrees as an overnight minima. Temperatures further north will drop a little as we get clearer skies late in the night. That weather front will still provide some drizzly rain for the north coast of Northern Ireland, northwest England and western parts of Scotland during Friday, slowly pushing northwards through the day. Further south, again, most places dry and perhaps brighter across parts of East Wales, southwest England. Better chance of seeing some sunny spells. Generally, though, still fairly cloudy, but look at the temperatures, well above average, double digits across the board, and some places getting into the teens. It'll stay pretty mild on Friday evening. Bit of light rain and drizzle here and there over the Northern Isles, the Western Isles, and some light rain at times over Western Hills. But most places dry as we head into Saturday, and certainly across much of the south. It will mostly stay that way. Again, a lot of cloud, but we should see some breaks in the cloud. We'll see some wetter weather coming into the northwest without breaks of rain. This is a weather front pushing across Scotland and Northern Ireland by the end of the afternoon. Another pretty mild one, again with temperatures widely in double figures and with some brightness across the south, 12 or 13 is possible. Should be a sunnier day on Sunday. Most places set fair, but it will also be just a little bit colder as well.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Energy companies are breaking down people's front doors to put in